Hello everyone and welcome back to The Attic. I want to start by addressing something because there have been some nasty rumors online. The books on my side table are real books with real titles by real authors, and I'm not switching in fake ones over the course of the show. I would never, ask the art department at our show to make phony book covers for non-existent Thornbury sequels and then have them sent here in the mail for a bit that all of, I want to say, 8 people tops would even enjoy. I mean, that would be a colossal waste of time. And I also want to assure you that if it was a bit, which it's not, I would stop it immediately before it dragged out and became unsatisfying. Speaking of unsatisfying, boom, another perfect segue. The president is declaring victory on coronavirus, even as a whistleblower offered damning testimony today on the Trump administration's disastrous response. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. Today, the House heard damning testimony from Dr. Rick Bright, a whistleblower who is punished for questioning the president's aggressive advertising of the unproven anti-malaria drug hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for coronavirus. Do you remember hydroxychloroquine, the Furby medical fads for like a month? Hydroxychloroquine was hotter than CBD oil, and it turns out works just as well. Bright made clear today that his caution on hydroxychloroquine was part of the reason he was pushed out.
I believe part of the removal process for me was initiated because of a push back that I gave when they asked me to put in place an expanded access protocol that would make chloroquine more freely available to Americans that were not under the close supervision of a physician and may not even be confirmed to be infected with the coronavirus.
That's right, they wanted to give it out to people who might not even have had coronavirus. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump had personally submitted a request to travel around the country in a windowless white van offering loose bags of chloroquine to kids.
You guys want to ride the Quinn? I'll meet you out back behind the bleachers. This is a tiny bag of drugs.
Bright, a vaccine expert who led a biodefense agency in the health department, had a stark assessment of just how badly the Trump administration had failed in its response to the coronavirus outbreak.
I believe we could have done better. I believe there are critical steps that we did not take in time. Those alarms were not responded to with action.
Okay, side note here, but that is what I want a doctor to sound like. Calm, reasonable, doesn't engage in hyperbole, gives it to you straight. Trump, of course, prefers that his doctors sound like roadies for Metallica.
Hey man, I looked at your CAT scan. Looks like you got what we call upside down disease. Anyway, you want to ride the Quinn?
Although I have to say, probably even more shocking than that comment was this moment when Bright relayed a conversation he had about our shortage of respirator masks.
Congressman, I'll never forget the emails I received from Mike Bowen and indicating that our mask supply or N95 respirator supply was completely decimated. And he said, we're in deep.
Wow, you know it's bad when someone as soft-spoken as this guy drops a curse word on live television. It's like FaceTiming with your grandma and asking her how her knitting is going. Oh, I just do it to pass the time while I'm baking cookies. These mother are taking forever. Bright had a damning and truly harrowing assessment of where we are as a nation on everything from vaccines to testing. And he warned that if we don't put together a national strategy now, things could be very bleak come the fall.
Without better planning, 2020 could be the darkest winter in modern history. The truth must be based on science. We have the world's greatest scientists. Let us lead. Let us speak without fear of retribution. There are things we must do immediately. We must increase the public education about the basics: washing hands, social distancing, appropriate face covering.
Of course, as he was watching that, there was a good chance Trump was sneezing into his hands, surrounded by reporters and wearing a face mask over his eyes.
If I can't see you, I can't give you the corona.
Instead of listening to Bright and taking his warning seriously, Trump was on Fox News this morning, bragging about the one thing he always brags about, the China travel ban he imposed in late January. The New York Times reported last month that 430,000 people have traveled from China to the U.S. since coronavirus surfaced, but that hasn't stopped Trump from saying stuff like this.
In January, I put, and I was criticized by everybody, including Dr. Fauci, I put in a wall. We put in a very strong wall.
There's a good chance Trump thinks they built a literal wall between the U.S. and China.
We built a wall in the Pacific, keeping out immigrants, manatees, sharks, and whales. Unfortunately, we've had less trouble, less success, I should say, stopping dolphins, what with all the tricks they've learned at SeaWorld. SeaWorld, of course, a water park that thrived under Obama. So if we're pointing fingers,
The frustrating thing about listening to Dr. Bright's testimony is that everything he's talking about is possible, as we've seen from other countries. Throughout this crisis, Americans have watched as countries across the world, from Germany to Australia, New Zealand to Taiwan, successfully contained and suppressed their coronavirus outbreaks and began to safely and slowly reopen their economies. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., things are so bad, we have senators showing up to hearings like outlaw highwaymen drinking alone in the corner of a saloon. Tim Kaine, what happened to you? You went from vice presidential nominee to divorced dad who forgot it was Halloween. Although, I honestly do wish this Tim Kaine had been Hillary Clinton's running mate. Instead of debating Mike Pence, he would have challenged him to a duel. Hey, Mike Pence, how about you Pokemon go to hell? Insanely good mime work today, if you guys remember the Quinn. Although I will give him credit for at least wearing a mask, unlike some of his Republican colleagues who have decided to turn mask wearing, a proven technique for limiting transmission of respiratory illnesses, into yet another dumb culture war issue, like Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, who said this bizarre thing on Fox News.
I don't want to have to wear a face mask in the shower.
Okay, so don't. I think you're safe. I doubt anyone would want to be within 6 feet of you when you're naked and wet. No one's telling you to wear a face mask in the shower. Although based on voice alone, if anyone sounds like they should be wearing a Tim Kaine-style bandana, it's this douche of Hazard. Seriously, can we just make stuff up and then get angry about it now?
There's another thing. I don't want these crazy libs telling me to wear socks on my hands and a Birkin on my chin. I mean, I'll do it for public health, but I won't be happy about it.
You only need to wear a mask when you're out around other people or when you can't socially distance. I mean, where are you taking your showers? Are you secretly a Starship Trooper? Underrated film. If you want to catch up on that one, this is a good time to do it. Mask wearing is a simple technique that's been proven to reduce the transmission of respiratory illnesses, and it's been adopted widely in countries that have successfully contained or suppressed their outbreaks, like South Korea, which had their first confirmed case on the same day we had ours. South Korea successfully contained their outbreak early on, and they did it with massive nationwide testing. That wasn't just widespread, it was early. At the beginning of March, for example, when it was reported that fewer than 500 people had been tested here in the US, and South Korea, they already had drive-through setups where anyone could get tested safely without leaving their car and receive their results back in a few days. I know if you told Trump other countries were beating us on tests, he wouldn't care, but if you told him other countries were beating us on drive-thrus, we would have had this problem solved ASAP.
Today I'm invoking the Defense Production Act to immediately ramp up our nation's supply of masks, no-swab Frosty, Whoppers, apple pies. And I'm proud to announce today that thanks to the efforts of our site, the McRib is back. The one curve you don't want to flatten. And by the way, that doesn't mean coronavirus just disappeared forever in South Korea. In fact, they just had to reimpose some lockdown measures after a resurgence of cases. But that tells us two things. One, you can't just reopen the economy without expecting that outbreaks will reoccur. And two, you need an aggressive regime of testing, tracing, and isolation. If we had that here, everyone would feel much more comfortable knowing that if we went back to work and there was another outbreak, we'd detect it early and respond quickly. Instead, we have senators dressing like NPCs in Red Dead Redemption and others complaining that mask wearing is ruining their nightly bubble bath.
I'd like to sit in my tub and down blow bubbles, but I can't do that because I have to wear a mask to avoid spreading coronavirus to my ducky.
Now, South Korea set up their drive-through testing in February. By mid-March, Trump announced his own plan to expand drive-through testing, but he decided to rely on private companies instead, and did his usual shtick where he calls them up one by one to talk about how great they are.
We've been in discussions with pharmacies and retailers to make drive-through tests available in the critical locations identified by public health professionals. One of them is Doug McMillan from Walmart, and I'd like to have Doug, if you would, say a few words. And Richard, if you could come up, please. Richard, please. Walgreens. Brian Cornell, Target. Is Tom here? Tom Poland? And Matt Sauce, please, of Roche. David Pierre of Signify Health. Adam Schechter, who's really been of tremendous help, LabCorp, please. Thomas Moriarty, CVS. We all know CVS.
Dwayne and Reed from Dwayne Reed, thank you both for making it. Matthias Mickelberry, CEO of M&M's, great work. Long John Silver, right over there. We all know Long John. The R he blows, right over there. The Taco Bell Chihuahua. What's that? He's not in his box? Well, you have to think outside the box. Or just find him. Why? Because you quiero him to be here. The Noid. Where's the Noid? Right over there. It would break my heart if I avoided Noid, I think this, has this been going on long enough? Oh, Little Caesar's Pizza. You know, a lot of people think he's saying pizza, pizza, but not me. I know it's pizza, Copper Tone baby, where's the Copper Tone? Where is she? She can't get up because the dog has her swimsuit in its mouth? Is it the Taco Bell dog? Well, why don't you check?
So that was mid-March. I think that was the right amount of time to do that. Already far too late to begin scaling up testing, and it came after a testing debacle at the CDC that significantly slowed our response, but still, it was a promising initiative if it could get up and running quickly. Instead, a month after Trump's announcement, Business Insider found only 8 sites were operating among 3 of the companies. The 4th, Walgreens, wasn't able to open the first batch of its promised 15 locations until April 17th. Target opened only 1 site and appears to have dropped out of the effort. And if you go to CVS, they just decided to stop having employees altogether. Actually, all CVS's are technically drive-thrus, and that you could literally drive through one and there would be no one there to stop you. This is why we need an actual functioning, centralized federal government that listens to scientists instead of just relying on private companies to do things that don't benefit their investors or their bottom lines. Republicans love to hollow out the government and outsource everything to big business and then complain the government is incompetent and should be run like a business. That's their scam. Make government incompetent, then use that incompetence as proof the government is bad. They're like a husband who cheats on his wife and says, see, this is proof we need an open marriage. In fact, Republicans are now arguing that nonpartisan public health officials like Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading infectious disease expert, shouldn't be allowed to make decisions about the government's coronavirus response.
I think the one size fits all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision.
No one said he was. He wasn't even the one person at that hearing. There were 4 top public health officials who testified, including FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn, who Skyped in, I'm guessing, from the finale of Lost. I'm going to try to keep my answers brief as I may be a ghost. Also, as Fauci pointed out, all he does is offer advice as a doctor and public official. He often corrects himself or amends his judgments based on new information, and he doesn't make any policy decisions, yet they're acting like he's somehow a puppet master controlling an otherwise powerless Trump. Trump's the president. He's supposed to be the one who makes all the actual decisions. And yet, in their all-consuming attempts to cover for the president's failures, they've been casting about for someone else to blame, and they've apparently landed on Fauci. If you don't like the decisions Trump makes, then take it up with him. Of course, in this case, it's just easier to pretend Anthony Fauci is president, not Donald Trump, because then you'd have to acknowledge that the horrific death toll and the cratering economy have unfolded under Trump's watch. Instead, Fox News would rather concoct an elaborate fantasy where Fauci is making all the calls while he has Trump tied to a chair in a closet with duct tape over his mouth.
Fauci, there you go. I see you, Fauci. You can't hide anything.
As we've seen from other countries, it's possible to have an aggressive regime of testing, contact tracing, and social distancing to keep people safe while also making sure they keep their paychecks and health insurance. But Trump and his allies have no interest in any of that. They'd rather wish the virus away and send working people back into the economy like cannon fodder while they do their shows in safe isolation. They don't care if otherwise mild-mannered scientists are warning us that we're in deep. See? Real book. This has been A Closer Look. Please continue to give to City Harvest. Every day, more New Yorkers need their help putting food on the tables. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe. Wash your hands. We love you.